we can work through the agenda as usual. And anyone is welcome to join, jump in, and chat with us. If you just want to watch, it's on YouTube, and the links are all in the chat and on Discord. I will be monitoring the YouTube chat and the Jitsi and Matmos chats just in case there are comments and things from there. But I think let's dive right in. Are there any progress reports? Anyone been working on anything lately?
I can tell you what I plan on working next, but no, apart from like the liquidsoap participation I did and a couple of other organizational and planning things I was involved within locally, like I'm helping another station get onboarded to LibreTime now in Switzerland, which is a new development on my side, but isn't strictly relevant to the project. So.
Cool.
I had some stuff, just it's going to be regarding the pull request for 20.04. That's about it. So nothing
Okay,
else.
cool. Yeah, I haven't had a shot. Okay, we'll talk about that when we get to that one. Yeah, so I broke and fixed our playout in Pipo file. But in doing so, we now have proper reverse proxy support in the Python apps. So that should now work without modification behind a proxy. Looking at what else here has actually been merged. And I opened, fleshed out and continued on the Ubuntu 20.04 support PR, but haven't had time to test or work on that much in the last little while either. So yeah, it's been a fairly slow month, but I kind of think that's to be expected with where we are in the year, and it'll probably pick up now that we are getting a bit more into the flow of 2021. It would be nice to see it pick up a bit. I want to get a bit more work in once my personal life's slowed down a bit. But yeah, shall we move on to the 2004 discussion or PR?
Sure. I was able to, I just decided, I think it was a couple days ago, to test it. And I did realize that there was some issues with packages and some of the things that we needed to do for Python that were pushed in a PR that hadn't been added to the focal thing. So I moved over that and got it running, and then it seemed to work. It installed, but then it ran into issues with liquidsoap 1.4. And so I saw we had merged 1.4, but it just wasn't able to connect. So there's possibly an issue that's actually not related to, I don't know, like we merged 1.4 support, but I don't know how much it's been tested or who's using it. So maybe there's still issues there, or maybe it's a specific issue for Ubuntu. So I thought this would be a good time to bring it up.
It might be specific to the liquidsoap build, because when I wrote the 1.4 stuff, I did do quite long testing, but it was with my binaries, like the RPM binaries on a CentOS. And I wouldn't think it's really a distro difference. I would assume that it's probably more of a how we differently package liquidsoap. But then again, I've been looking at how Pada does it for Debian to fix my CentOS stuff, so it can't be that far apart.
Yeah, I don't know.
Probably try to look into that specific part, because I'm pretty sure it's something deep in liquidsoap territory.
Yeah, I couldn't even figure out exactly where the error was. I just kind of realized that this was something I wasn't sure what had been done, and you touched it more. So I think I've got all the packages installing, and I got everything working with the backport. There was just some syntax stuff and some package name changes, like BC Math needed to be installed specifically for 7.3, and all that stuff should be working. So I think it's ready for somebody else to test out, and then we could probably roll it out. And so people that aren't feeling like we're behind the, like there might also be some other little issues, but it seemed to basically work with Vagrant at least.
Okay.
After
cool.
So I think that's where we're at with that. I don't know. I just pushed my commit onto your tree, so onto your branch.
Awesome. Yeah.
Oh,
And I've
perfect.
just rebased it on master and pushing it now.
Yeah, so I'll really try to also give that a spin.
Okay.
Especially if it's liquid soap issues, maybe I'll be able to pin them down.
Yeah, it just wasn't able to connect. That was the only issue I noticed. It was doing the similar, and it actually could even be that issue that was happening with the proxy support, that because that wasn't changed. Maybe, I don't know for sure. It could be once we pull into master, it might fix it, because it was just having some weird kind of connection issues. So it could actually just be that port thing that we recently fixed with typo.
Was that already broken in the last release? I kind
No,
of missed that.
No.
Okay, so
it
it's not
was
something that
released
warrants an
afterwards.
extra release.
No.
No, it was just something that got changed, and then our people testing and upgrading were like, "Hey, things are broken now," so we had to fix it. But
I really need to get on to doing more and often releases, so it's the logical way to go, because I feel it would be much more easier if it wasn't needed that we need to figure out which version of master somebody is on. It's like often we're asking like, which commit-ish did you use? And obviously nobody knows.
we could even do something like, if we're going to be doing these monthly meetings, even just like release one each month. I don't know. But I guess we were going to talk about that later with semantic
Yeah.
versioning. So
Yeah. And semantic releasing.
yeah.
Okay, and then the next one was the Travis to GitHub Actions PR, which is open. There's a couple things that still need doing on that. I suppose I could have opened that one. So there's a failing test that we can probably skip in the PHP stuff for DB unit. There's a failing Python test for replay gain. And for some reason, it's not exiting non-zero on a failed test. So GitHub Actions is passing even if there are failed tests in the suite.
I've been considering if we shouldn't just get rid of nose test and switch to PiTest. Make stuff like that so much easier, and it would be pretty much a drop-in replacement.
Yeah. So moving to PiTest.
Yeah, just getting rid of nose tests and running the same tests without even changing them through PiTest, in my opinion, would make things like this much more predictable. Because PiTest is what everybody uses, and nose test is what everybody used like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I can definitely we can create an issue about it. I'm happy to take a look at some of it. And it may be a good opportunity to flesh out some of the tests that we don't have at the moment too.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I'm mentioning PiTest, because it would also help us use like parameterized testing, where you can just have the same test function and have it loop over a bunch of arguments and stuff like that, which makes it much easier to like test in depth.
Yeah, and for fuzzy testing and testing edge cases would be quite helpful too. Cool. Yeah, I'd be very excited about that.
I can actually look into this replacement. Shouldn't be that hard, in my opinion. I've done this before with projects that just used basic Python test suite stuff, like the unit test thing. And nose test is just a fancy runner based on that.
Yeah. Yeah, because it is effectively just I don't even think we've got any mocking. We may have one or two mocks, but that's it. There's
We don't
nothing
need to replace
complex.
those. Those will
Yeah.
work just fine with PyTest as well.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, cool. Then the final one was the API 2.0.
I didn't add the view one to this list because
Yes.
it's basically covered by the
Really,
API 2.0. I think the view stuff and
yeah,
the API stuff will want to merge those pretty close to each other.
yeah. I'll add that here.
And like the API stuff took a bit to get ripe to being even review ready. I think the
Yeah.
view one will also take a bit more effort. Right now it's a unmaintainable beast with way too much stuff. Like all the storybook stuff I did, I'm not sure if it doesn't add too much complexity.
Okay, I see. I need to rebase the API on current master. There's clashes there. But yeah, is there anything that you need help with, or the space for people to help with on the view side of things?
Not sure. At some point, yes, but right now it's really more of a thing that I should update it again and rebase it again as well. And I have lots of random commits in random branches that I want to move on to that view pull request branch because they make the integration with like the PHP parts. And that was really just like a chaotic spree of just knocking out pull requests that I still need to clean up because they sometimes break a lot of stuff. And those are on a dev/whatever branch in my fork and not on the view pull request. So I still have some actionable tasks to do with the view stuff before it really makes sense. But if anyone would like to like get it running locally and give me feedback how bad it fails, because it's really mainly tested on my dev box, that would be interesting.
Cool. Yeah.
With the API, what I'm wondering is do we know how much work it's still going to need? At one point, I was asking about maybe a standard like JSON API, and did we ever come to a conclusion on what we'd expect from the API before we merge it? Like some kind of definition of done stuff.
So probably not. I don't recall actually doing any of that, so I don't think it's in there yet. I'm just actually reading my comments on here.
Yeah, at some point you commented that we're really not gonna, or that you don't plan on focusing like the API 2.0 for the 3.0 release. And I think it was Gus that said like, hey, can't you focus on 3.0 before you start working on APIs? Like is his nature as sustainability guy, which is really his prerogative and is totally fine. I'm not against merging it before. For me, it's just like if we merge it right now, and it would be mostly ready and people actually deploy it, they would be deploying a very insecure feature that we might need to change very much right soon after. At least that's when I'm talking about definition of done, it's like the whole security setup that we should take a look at. And I can really do that. I have done similar integrations with this exact, or more or less this exact stack. I can really look at some projects I did at work, and so to do some kind of integration where we either delegate the auth parts 100% to Python from the get-go, or we start with delegating auth from Python to PHP and then refactor to switch how it works. Those are the kinds of thoughts I'm having regarding this. And I'd really like to contribute in this exact area of the Python integration.
Mr. Bloom, I know.
Yeah, that is something that needs to be done, because there's also a lot of permissioning stuff that isn't in the API. So users with with permissions, like very basic guest permissions, can actually get quite far in the current API, just because none of that is implemented yet.
Yeah, we'll also want to talk about maybe even refactoring our permission model. The way it's done in the PHP stack right now with these 3 or 4 basic roles that are hard-coded is very inflexible. And it doesn't allow us much control.
Yeah. And with the way Django set up, we can do it a lot more fine-tuned and fine-grained.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I would agree that that would probably be that at the least would be the thing that we would want to do before we merge it. Just because that, we don't want to add an additional feature that opens up people's sites to just somebody, doing a
Yeah.
bunch of stuff that they're not
We
supposed
have
to.
a lot of those already.
Exactly. So try to avoid adding any additional like obvious ones.
Yeah. Cool. Then I just want to get up the roadmap or the project for 3.0.
Yeah.
I'll have a look and see what we still have listed here. In fact, I probably can share it. Does this show? Yes, it works. Cool. So this is the beta release blocker tracking board. There are probably other things that aren't on here, but this is, I think, fairly comprehensive. So I think the biggest thing that we actually spoke about last month was the watch folders. Still, there's been no progress there.
Yeah.
So it's still pretty much the blocker, and we've had some progress on the Adobe Flash. That has been refactored out of the analytics export stuff,
Right.
which is great. So you can now export to CSV, PDF without needing Flash. So it's now working again. But
Is it still used in the player?
Yeah, as far as I know, it's still used in the player.
Okay. I know the
But
player has this weird hybrid where it can do either. And
it
it
has a
never, I know.
fallback. Yeah.
So I know Zachary did some stuff on that, but then he kind of had to he got in too far or there was too many features. He was just like, okay, I'm gonna have to start this over again, as has happened to almost all of us working with this code at one point or another. So
At the moment, the one that I see is really the biggest issue is really the watched folders thing. And I was wondering, is someone really actively working on that? Because I think I might have an excuse to work on it for my station. And that's
okay.
the only reason I never touched it, because it was way too broken and I didn't have a use for it originally. And it's always
So
been kind of on the things I'd like to just greenfield anew and do in proper,
Yeah.
like with Python.
yeah, it looks like the PRs for it haven't been touched in over a year. So I don't think anyone's
Yeah.
actively working on it at the moment.
I think this is one of those things where numerous people have implemented it to their own specifications and actually have it working, but then they end up kind of stuck in their own fork because things change in main and their fork and their progress was never implemented. I know that that's at least happened a couple times on some of these PRs. So I think that doing things from the beginning and kind of doing it right and making it work, and then especially having it work with the existing, doing some kind of upgrade path, because I think that's the only other thing to do is that upgrade path from the music directories from 2.5. So if we could even now giving some way for people that are theoretically still running airtime out there. I don't know how many people are actually doing it anymore.
Too much.
There might be.
Too much.
So
I'm sure there's too much of those still around. I mean, we have people popping up. Hey, I'm trying to migrate right now, like once a week,
yeah, so
or
I'm
maybe
sure
once a
that,
month. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but if you look on like Discord,
yeah,
on Discourse, there's like once a month someone is saying, "Hey, I'm trying to upgrade my airtime." So it's pretty obvious that there's lots of users still.
yeah. I
Mm.
mean, it was pretty widely disseminated, and I think a lot of people, like any kind of software, once it's established, if you don't know how it was working or you're not like an expert, you just leave it running. So I'm sure there are probably a lot of people that would benefit from LibreTime,
Mm.
from their airtime. So yeah, that would be the only other thing, is that kind of could be merged in if we did it, was making sure that existing watched folders somehow get rolled into our new one.
Mm. Yeah, that's the main. I think that's the main thing we want to do. I think the PHP parts and what's in the database to like configure the watched folder stuff, that's all fine. Even the RabbitMQ API is more or less fine. We might want to change some stuff so it gets run through Celery rather than having its own direct connection to RabbitMQ. And it needs to really be API first implementation, as in I think it should just download tracks and then upload them to the app, or grab tracks from the file system and then somehow in a weird fashion talk to the API to get everything done without copying the file. Yeah, I've looked into it before and I was glad that someone else tried to fix it. But at this point, it's going to really be the main thing that also doesn't do the upgrade process. I've had this
Yeah.
discussion with lots of stations actually, where they just say, "Oh, it can't scan my existing collections, so we won't even consider it."
Right. Yeah. And it is such a, and then
And
also there is issues with the way that Pipo copies files, and the way that that all works is that's where we've seen these kind of bugs crop up, where where it plays the same track twice. And that's still like one of these underlying things where none of us know exactly how the glue is supposed to work,
Mm.
and why exactly, why, when it fails, it fails. Like what I've seen is it says that file is already in use. I can't copy on that new file, even though it knows that the new file is supposed to be ran. So that ends up just screwing up everything, because that's the one thing about LibreTime is, in real time, anything, when you have a schedule, if you have a change, you can't really, it's really hard to fix it by going back and, starting the whole thing over again, because then somebody's going to get cut off. But yeah, so I don't know if that would have anything to do with this, but you were talking about the idea of copying the files. I guess it would still copy the files into Liquids. The Pipo would
well,
still
in
copy the
Pipo, yeah,
files.
Pipo would still copy them. The Pipo issue you just mentioned, I remember trying to reproduce that for like months, and
Yeah.
I failed. It was pretty early in the fork, but I really, that was one of the issues that I really bit my teeth out on.
I know we need to figure. I think we need to something needs to happen. That would be, if I were to pick an issue that I would just love to like solve, I think that would be it, because I feel like that's the biggest thing that, other than this, that anybody running it's going to be like, why is everything wrong? And I get calls, well, we're an hour behind on the schedule. And I'm like, oh, I have to restart, Liquid Soap and restart Playout. And then all of a sudden it works. But there's some kind of race condition, or I don't even know. We don't even know what it is, but it has happened enough that there's something in the code.
Does
And
your
it's not,
file system have access times and everything, or is there a no A time flag on it?
I don't know. It's all just local like setup. It's whatever Ubuntu's been upgraded a couple times.
Mm.
So yeah, I don't know. We'll have to. That's another thing that we're just sitting there. That's a bug that would be good to solve. But
Yeah. Okay.
So I guess the project board is probably pretty focused and has everything we need to like for the or we currently know about for the 3.0. Or is there an issue for this that's in the thing? Like the issue you just described, Rob.
there are issues. That issue is there, but until we can replicate it, it's so hard to like make something you can't replicate a blocker.
Okay.
That's why I guess there's probably numerous things that would be considered bugs, but that might be good to solve. But I wouldn't call them a blocker until we can figure out exactly how it happens.
I'm just
Yeah, I
scanning
guess that
through
sounds fine.
some of the things, but okay, there seems to be ones tagged as release blocker, but aren't actually on the blocker board. Things like the rate limits on Travis CI.
Is it only tasks on the board and not pull requests?
No, this is an issue. It was one opened by you,
Okay.
1123.
Who assigned the podcast? Did we get rid of podcasts?
Yeah, we did.
So I guess we can close that one. The My Podcast has been removed.
Hmm.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to close this issue. So
Okay, so there are a couple more things that aren't on the board that should probably be. But we can add them through.
I'm just trying to figure out the GitHub search to add them in one go.
Ooh. There we go. That should be better for the stream.
Yeah, it's label colon 3.0 blah 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 in the add cards dialog. And yes, there are 3 blocking issues that haven't been added. One of them is the rate limit, which I'll put into progress. Correctly support upgrade using install script 940 is going into to do. And formalize documentation as a requirement for every PR that adds a new feature is to do as well.
do we want to keep that in the blocker? I guess.
It had a blocker and now it's on the board.
Okay, whatever.
We can discuss removing it, to be honest. It's not... You created it, Rob, so
I know,
guess
I
you
guess
get
I
to
did.
decide, at least from my point.
I don't think it should be a blocker per se.
I think it's more of a development process thing than a
Yeah.
3.0 thing.
The
Yeah.
actual blocker behind it is probably having a great documentation quality, which in my opinion is something that I've been targeting for like beta.
And
For
we
a
have
long time we had crappy docs and we started removing stuff, and we've become we are very far in this part of the beta.
Yeah, I feel like our documentation and the UI for the website, you know, Zach did a ton of work and it looks a lot better. And
Oh,
so
I know
yeah,
what. Let's move it to the documentation to-do thing. Because my feeling is like the documentation to-dos are a bit more negotiable anyway. We can finish the close out the project without having done 100% of them.
That makes sense.
Cool. So I think that's fairly well documents what we need to do for 3.0. It'd be nice to get that out the door at some point. Release when it's ready.
Yeah, no promises for an ETA here.
Yeah. With Debian, not Ubuntu. Cool. So the next thing was something I use at work, that may tie in with the automatic changelog stuff that Zach was adding to the GitHub Actions. It's called semantic commits. Emma, you kind of use them already, I see. Most of your commits to that, but it's essentially adding a tag to commits that describe whether they're a feature, a bug fix, a chore, or some sort of thing, and kind of directly can relate to whether it's included in a change log or whether it's a breaking change, a feature, or a bug fix. So, in terms of semantic versioning, what kind of version bump it ends up being. Not sure it's very helpful for us at the moment with alpha because all things can be breaking, but it may be very helpful for generating automatic change logs, and kind of being clear as to how we do our versioning as we go forward. So I don't know. It was more a thought of maybe something we can look at.
That looks useful.
I think it's very useful as well. What I would not do is like enforce it on every pull request, because if we like have a linter that tries to validate if the commit follows the convention, then we'll be asking people that maybe just started using GitHub to rebase their commits and rewrite their history, and that's just something we can squash and merge their pull requests for them and like
Yeah.
adapt it. But asking people to like rebase just to follow this convention is something that I don't think is like a support burden we want to have for new contributors, because we need to help them, and it's frustrating for everyone that's like with it. So my thing is, I think, especially with regards to getting into the direction of using like a semantic releasing even, I see it like a progress. First, we adopted Semware. We did that when we forked. Now we adopt semantic commit. And sometime in the future, when semantic commit is the lay of the land and no new dev doesn't understand it, then we can think about semantic release. It won't help us before we hit 3.0 anyway.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it actually incorporates to what we were talking about before with the adding documentation whenever somebody adds a feature. That'll give us some way of just kind of, if we add it to our contributor like documentation, that would be helpful as a best practice.
Is it possible to do a kind of a squash commit through the GitHub UI when you're merging, or is
Yeah,
would that
there's
kind of
like this green arrow at the right of the merge button, and there you can choose squash and merge. And then there's a UI where you can change the commit message of the squash and merged commit, just like you would do locally with your editor. And
okay?
it
Yeah.
works fine. I've actually, I have some projects nowadays where I just switched that to be the default merging strategy. But those were like new projects where I didn't have much existing history to conserve, so we like did that as a conscious decision from the get-go of that project. So I wouldn't like do this in any case for us. It mostly makes sense if like you need to rewrite commit messages, or if maybe someone uploaded like a huge JS file that was removed later on in the same PR, then we can kind of use squash and merge to be sure that that doesn't hit our history. Like, for instance, if someone committed a vagrant box to the repo and we ask them to remove it, they remove it in a revert commit, squash and merge would help keep that completely out of our history.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So in terms of actionable things for this, suppose we can add it to our contributor documentation, and yeah, talk about semantic versioning, semantic commits, but not require it of contributors.
We could also do a pull request template. I don't think we have one yet.
No, we don't. Yeah.
Those are a rather new feature, so that's
Yeah,
probably
that
the
would,
reason. But we could do a pull request template that contains a hint.
right. That would be what I would think would make sense.
Cool. So that's, yeah, we can do a pull request template and have it in there.
And also add it to the docs, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, and then we mentioned the last meeting that Liquid Shop was happening, and Pema, you presented at it. I quite enjoyed your talk, looking at the broadcaster's niche, why we contribute. And there were quite a few other radio stations and streaming stations that presented. I haven't had a chance really to look at it or watch many of the talks, but I was wondering whether someone who has, or is there any interesting talks that maybe highlight some things about liquid soap that we could potentially leverage, or ways people are using it that we may want to consider?
I think first and foremost is probably the keynote speech by Toots, where he talked about the whole Liquid Soap 2.0 release, which is going to really change a bit how Liquid Soap works under the hood. The language will more or less stay the same, but it'll be a native FFmpeg scripting language of sorts. So we will really be programming FFmpeg pipelines in Liquid Soap in future. And I think that's certainly one of the very interesting things. One of my key takeaways has also been, and this is also informing me at my station when it comes to strategy planning, is the strong focus that Radio France, which had a very technical presentation, has on video. At my station, at least, video has always been something we didn't actually look into very much. We did like some experiments with like streaming directly to YouTube a bit ago. I know there has also been some discussion about using OBS in our community, and that was like the other takeaway I had, that this whole video stuff is really going to be something that's going to be much more important for us as well. I think Zach started with implementing the artwork feature, or at least I remember it being Zach that implemented that, and that's also going to be something that might become much more relevant in future for radio generally, not really only specific to LibreTime.
Yeah, video is definitely not something that comes to my mind when I think about radio. So it would be an interesting place to take stuff. And the artwork will definitely help that, or at least give people an avenue to use that.
The Radio France talk was very much also about like having shareables, like taking parts of your news and putting them up on maybe Twitter as a short video and stuff like that when it comes to video in the broader context of like the modern hybrid radio stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pushing things beyond what even like the National Public Radio is doing here in the States, you know, in terms of they're not quite there, but that makes sense as far as reaching the audience where they are.
Yeah, the thing is, I think it's a bit a political thing also. Like NPR in the States is quite niche. And like in Europe, in most countries, the national public broadcasting stuff is like cornering the market. Everyone watches that. Everyone listens to like the national broadcaster in Switzerland, and you only listen to like weird stations that also have ads on them in some cases, but most people don't listen to those stations. They listen to the national broadcast stuff. And that's really very different to the US.
It also has a lot to do with the politics too, because there's so much of it, like the political spectrum depends on which stations people listen to, and a lot of the talk radio is obviously just like, super right wing in the States, or even just religious. So, yeah, that makes sense.
The religious ones, we have them in Switzerland as well, sadly. But like the right talk radio, I don't think there's that much in Europe. It's just the format, the whole talk radio format is actually one I didn't actually see happening in Europe as much as it would be expected. We had one group try it at our station, but we blocked them pretty early once we noticed what kind of hate they were trying to push.
Cool. Well, thanks for the feedback. I'm definitely going to try watch that talk and have a look at some of the other ones as well. The next point I have here is the LibreTime blog. I don't know whether it's something that may be interesting, but I thought of it may be helpful to kind of summarize and disseminate what we talk about in these meetups, instead of making people sit through an hour-long video to kind of try and work out what they want to hear. Maybe it's something that would be nice, just a short summary of what's going on, for just context, people who've missed the meeting or have parts that they want to go back to, things like that.
Maybe the auto-generated stuff from YouTube helps write stuff like this. At least when I was searching for a specific timestamp, because we didn't write down when the next meeting would be in the minutes, I used the YouTube feature that does these subtitles. There's a way where you can access the full transcript. And I used that to find a specific place in the video, but maybe that would help to write such blog posts.
Yeah.
They would obviously need very much redacting from what the full minute, what the full trans or recognition is that YouTube does. But I think it would be nice. But to be honest, I'm too lazy to write blog posts. I don't write them at work either.
No, I'd be happy to do it. It's just I need to build it into, like, make it a habit, because otherwise I'll forget.
The one other thing that actually I got from kind of the Liquid shop was the integration of chat, and how people had these different like kind of pop-up chat. And I went to like kpist.fm, and they had their DJs there live talking about every song, and that kind of had this kind of, and there was another station I think that also like was built these like kind of web stations. But I thought that would be something interesting. Like I think Rocket Chat actually has like a web front end integration, and then I started looking into it more, and I was thinking about OAuth versus the LDAP stuff, because I think the free IPA stuff, it's a little bit over the top in terms of just like when I've looked at it, as far as like the process of implementing it for my station, it seems a little bit like overkill.
You can just use LDAP. The free IPA stuff, it's really just free IPA in the name of our docs, but everything should work with Active Directory and other LDAP implementations without anything. The main issue is that the UID and DN strings for the LDAP config are very specific to free IPA, but everything's configurable. So if you like, your Active Directory, then it should really just be a config and everything will work.
Okay, yeah, we just don't have any kind of thing set up currently for, we have a Drupal website, and then we have these, the LibreTime. So it's just, and we have like a Zulip chat thing that's not even, so trying to figure out a way to integrate all those would be a benefit, but it hasn't been at the top of my priority, because it's, we don't have Yeah.
What I've seen happen with like smaller stations is if they have like a Synology or QNAP NAS device, they just activate LDAP on that and use that. Done. That
That's a good
seems to
idea.
work nicely. It's usually an open LDAP implementation, but it really doesn't matter what kind of implementation your LDAP server is based on. You just need to
Okay.
like have a bit of LDAP know-how, so you can adapt the search strings and maybe validate if your searches work on the command line. But it's more generic LDAP know-how that's needed to configure it, and there's nothing
Okay.
specific to FreeIPA in the actual
Got it.
implementation.
You hear me? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes,
S-
now we can.
Oh, sorry.
just
Yeah, I
it's a
was
bit
just saying
soft, but we
that
can hear you.
I tried and it didn't work, the LDAP thing. I have an Active Directory and I have like maybe 6 or 8 platforms like Nextcloud and many Drupal sites, and it's just not working. I hadn't didn't have the time to really get into it, but I just wanted to let you know it's
Mhm.
not working.
I'm sure that the thing that it's not working is fixable, but I don't have access to an Active Directory that isn't an Azure Active Directory, so I can't really, so I don't have an environment to test it. But
Okay.
I really know that the library I used was one that I've used in the past for Active Directory. I would probably start checking if the TLS chain with the Active Directory certificate authority all matches up. Usually the first round of problems with these integrations are somewhere in that region.
Yeah, I'll find some time to dig it up, but just want to say that. Um, it's working in many other platforms I'm using. So I'm using DCL that Active Directory thing, and it's like working on many other platforms. It's just with the same configuration. It's just the LibreTime one that is not working. So maybe I'll DM you and try to figure out.
Yeah, or if you can dump any logs or something, this would actually be something I consider more than enough for a GitHub issue.
Sure.
Because yeah, if it doesn't work for Active Directory, then I would consider that a bug. Because when I wrote it, I was clearly thinking about it working for all the implementations. It's really just the docs that are currently free IPA specific.
Sure.
And when it is working, a PR to fix the doc or to have include docs for uh, other implementations would be great too.
With others being OpenLDAP and
Yeah.
Active Directory. I think those are the only two other implementations that are relevant for our case because everyone else builds on one of those.
Cool. Um. Okay, I guess we've got about 9 minutes left. I would like to keep this to an hour. And also I um need I've got things that need to be it. So question and answer session. Are there any questions or things that any people listening or on the chat would like us to chat about or would like to talk to us about?
I'll also try to be online in chat for a bit if anyone has further questions after our hour is done.
Yeah, I think Herme, I'll join you for that post-session chat just to talk about some of those issues that you were speaking about earlier on. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to be hopping into a different Jitsi just after, but I'll be in chat.
Okay, cool. All right. No problem.
I'm just taking the chance to.
K054 asks, has
Yeah.
anyone ever faced copyright or licensing problems like from content or music being streamed?
Once. We did a pilot a couple of years back where we tried to get live streaming to YouTube up and running, and there we had lots of copyright detection issues. what I know is, unless it's like YouTube scale, a lot of this stuff is usually very country specific. Like with my station, we recently had very discussions with our National Collection Society, but those I really only need to share those with stations in Switzerland because they're very specific to Switzerland, and it works totally different in the States or in Germany even. There used to be, or still is, a rather large article that's I don't remember who wrote it. It's an original airtime article that talks about this collecting society stuff, and I think pretty much of it is still rather relevant. Most of it, at least, is still relevant and not very outdated. So in most cases, you really need to get a license from your collection society so no one can bugger you. And then you can use that license to force other platforms into not being difficult, like SoundCloud, whatever.
Yeah, it's under rights and royalties for program managers on the LibreTime.org docs.
I think it's a bit US specific, but I think also the general message it's telling is not wrong. In Switzerland, I know the Collection Society actually has different tariffs. If I want to do like a small scale web radio station with up to 6,000 listeners, it won't even cost that much to get like this license. I think it's maybe $20 a month or something. So nothing, but also kind of in the range of something a hobbyist might want to put up with.
Did you
The biggest
mention a
challenge
link
is
or like
we don't.
place in the website?
Yeah, the summary is under rights and royalties. You go to libretime.org/docs, and then under program managers, there's a thing that says rights and royalties. The one thing that we don't have is very good support for putting out the report of what songs played at what particular time. That every place also has their own different expectations in terms of reporting. So that's probably the biggest challenge you might run into if you were trying to comply with the regulations and they wanted you to do a report in a specific spreadsheet that has this many listeners were listening to this song at this time. People have done that with LibreTime, and some people have written their own scripts to try to extract that data, and it probably is extractable, but it's not supported directly in a very easy way.
Often also the MP3s don't have enough data. We usually need to use an external service to like get the actual keys that our collection society expects.
Yeah, because there's a special like code usually in a lot of them. I think we have support for that in the database. Yeah, the ISRC. I think that's in the database, but not every MP3 has that in their ID3 tag. And then there's also the issue of combination files that are like mixes that have many different copyrighted songs playing at the same time. And so you almost need some kind of thing like we talked about Art Cloud last time as something that people could use outside of LibreTime. And there might even be services that do this already there where they listen to your stream. And I think there's something called Spinitron, which is very US specific that does kind of this track identification, and they sell it as one of these one-off services that you have to pay a certain amount of money and they kind of, yeah.
I'm pretty sure that Spinitron is based on the ACR Cloud thing.
Oh yeah, totally. I'm not going to get into Spinitron, but they also at one point had a whole open source project that they kind of took over that was supposed to be open sourced for like crowdfunding and all this different stuff for radio stations that never went anywhere. They got, one of these $1 million grants to like develop this great thing that never quite came into fruition. So it was one of these things I heard about from Gus many, many, many years ago in terms of trying to figure out, is this a cool thing to use? But yeah.
Okay, then I think we should probably wrap stuff up.
Next meeting, I guess, is the most important thing.
Yep.
So we are getting pretty much onto time. In terms of the next meeting, shall we look at the third Wednesday of next month?
Yep,
So
the
that's
17th again.
The 17th again, yeah.
That works for me. I don't know. I mean, I think it does.
It does so far.
Yeah. For at least all of us. I mean, there's obviously other people that aren't.
Yeah. I'll
But
try. I will try float a discussion on discourse about it too.
Okay.
And just to see if there's anyone else who these times really don't work for them. But I think let's provisionally say 17th of March 2021 at
Yep.
1900 UTC.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, works for me as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, everyone. And I'll
Yeah. Thanks again, everybody.
see you on the next one.
Yeah.
All right. Take care.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, bye, Peter.
Cheers. Bye.